A kayak is a small, narrow boat which is propelled by means of a double-bladed paddle. The word kayak originates from the Greenlandic language, where it is the word qajaq. In the UK, the term canoe is often used when referring to a kayak. The traditional kayak has a covered deck and one or more cockpits, each seating one paddler. The cockpit is sometimes covered by a spray deck that prevents the entry of water from waves or spray and makes it possible for suitably skilled kayakers to roll the kayak, that is, to capsize and right it without it filling with water or ejecting the paddler. Some modern boats vary considerably from a traditional design but still claim the title kayak. For instance, in eliminating the cockpit by seating the paddler on top of the boat, having inflated air chambers surrounding the boat, replacing the single hull by twin hulls, and replacing paddles with other human-powered propulsion methods, such as foot-powered rotational propellers and flippers. Kayaks are also being sailed, as well as propelled by means of small electric motors, and even by outboard gas engines. The kayak was first used by the indigenous Aleutian, Inuit, Yupik and possibly Ainu hunters in subarctic regions of the world. History. Kayaks, Yupik, Qajaq, Aleutian kayaks, were originally developed by the Inuit, Yupik, and Aleutian. They used the boats to hunt on inland lakes, rivers and coastal waters of the Arctic Ocean, North Atlantic, Bering Sea and North Pacific Oceans. These first kayaks were constructed from stitched seal or other animal skins stretched over a wooden whalebone skeleton frame. Kayaks are believed to be at least 4,000 years old. The oldest existing kayaks are exhibited in the North America Department of the State Museum of Ethnology in Munich. Native people made many types of boat for different purposes. The paddle.The, developed by indigenous cultures in Alaska, was also made in double or triple cockpit designs, for hunting and transporting passengers or goods. An umiak is a large open-sea canoe, ranging from 17 to 30 feet, made with seal skins and wood. It is considered a kayak although it was originally paddled with single-bladed paddles, and typically had more than one paddler. Native builders designed and built the boats based on their own experience and that of the generations before them, passed on through oral tradition. The word kayak means man's boat or hunter's boat, and native kayaks were a personal craft, each built by the man who used it, with assistance from his wife who sewed the skins, and closely fitting his size for maximum maneuverability. A special skin jacket, qajaq, was then laced to the kayak, creating a waterproof seal. This enabled the Eskimo roll to become the preferred method of regaining posture after capsizing. Especially as few Inuit could swim, the waters are too cold for a swimmer to survive for long. Instead of a qajaq, most traditional kayakers today use a spray deck made of waterproof synthetic material stretchy enough to fit tightly around the cockpit rim and body of the kayaker, and which can be released rapidly from the cockpit to permit easy exit. Inuit kayak builders had specific measurements for the boats. The length was typically 3 times the span of his outstretched arms. The width of the cockpit was the width of the builder's hips plus 2 fists. The typical depth was his fist plus the outstretched thumb. Thus typical dimensions were about 17 feet long by 20 to 22 inches wide by 7 inches deep. This measurement system confounded early European explorers who tried to duplicate the kayak, because each kayak was a little different. Traditional kayaks encompass 3 types. Paddle, from the Bering Sea in Aleutian Islands, the oldest design, whose rounded shape and numerous chines give them an almost blimp-like appearance. West Greenland kayaks, with fewer chines and a more angular shape, with gunnels rising pointing to a point at the bow and stern, and East Greenland kayaks that appear similar to the West Greenland style, but often fit more snugly to the paddler and possess a steeper angle between gunwale and stem, which lends maneuverability. Most of the Aleutian people in the Aleutian Islands eastward to Greenland Inuit relied on the kayak for hunting a variety of prey, primarily seals, though whales and caribou were important in some areas. Skin-on-frame kayaks are still being used for hunting by Inuit people in Greenland, because the smooth and flexible skin glides silently through the waves. In other parts of the world, home builders are continuing the tradition of skin-on-frame kayaks, usually with modern skins of canvas or synthetic fabric, such as SC. Ballistic nylon. Contemporary traditional-style kayaks trace their origins primarily to the native boats of Alaska, northern Canada, and southwest Greenland. Wooden kayaks and fabric kayaks on wooden frames dominated the market up until the 1950s, when fiberglass boats were first introduced in the U.S., and inflatable rubberized fabric boats were first introduced in Europe. Rotomolded plastic kayaks first appeared in 1973, and most kayaks today are made from rotomolded polyethylene resins. The development of plastic and rubberized inflatable kayaks arguably initiated the development of freestyle kayaking as we see it today, since these boats could be made smaller, stronger and more resilient than fiberglass boats. Design principles. Typically, kayak design is largely a matter of trade-offs: directional stability versus maneuverability, stability versus speed, and primary versus secondary stability. This is true for single-hull kayaks, but does not necessarily encompass newer types of hulls, such as twin hulls. Length. As a general rule, a longer kayak is faster. See hull speed. Kayaks that are built to cover longer distances, such as touring and sea kayaks, are longer, generally 16 to 19 feet. With touring kayaks, the keel is generally more defined. Whitewater kayaks, which generally depend upon river current for the forward motion, are short, to maximize maneuverability. These kayaks rarely exceed 8 feet in length, and playboats may be only 5 to 6 feet long. Recreational kayak designers try to provide more stability at the price of reduced speed, and compromise between tracking and maneuverability, ranging from 9 to 14 feet. Primary and secondary stability. Primary stability describes how much a boat tips or rocks back and forth when displaced from level by paddler weight shifts. Secondary stability describes how stable a kayak feels when put on edge or when waves are passing under the hull perpendicular to the length of the boat. Primary stability is often a big concern to a beginner, while secondary stability matters both to beginners and experienced travelers. By example, a wide, flat-bottomed kayak will have high primary stability and feel very stable on flat water. However, when a steep wave breaks on such a boat, it can be easily overturned because the flat bottom is no longer level. By contrast, a kayak with a narrower, more rounded hull can be edged or leaned into waves and provides a safer, more comfortable response on stormy seas. Beam profile. The most important attribute in determining the stability of a single-hulled kayak is the overall width of its cross-section. The shape of the cross-section can affect both maneuverability and stability. Hull shapes are categorized by roundness, flatness, whether it has a V shape at various points, and by the presence and severity of a chine, where the side and bottom of a hull meet at an angle, creating an edge below the gunwales. This cross-section may vary along the length of the boat. Kayaks with only moderate primary, but excellent secondary stability are, in general, considered more seaworthy, especially in challenging conditions. A V-shaped hull tends to ease traveling straight, but makes turning harder. V-shaped hulls also have the greatest secondary stability. Conversely, flat-bottomed hulls are easy to turn, but harder to direct in a constant direction. The chine typically increased secondary stability by effectively widening the beam of the boat when it yields. Sea kayaks, designed for open water and rough conditions, are generally narrower 22 to 25 inches and have more secondary stability than recreational kayaks, which are wider 26 to 30 inches, have a flatter hull shape, and more primary stability. Hull surface profile. Traditional kayak hulls are categorized according to the shape from bow to stern. Common shapes include symmetrical. The widest part of the boat is halfway between bow and stern. Fish form. The widest part is forward of the midpoint. Swede form. The widest part is aft midpoint. Rocker length alone does not fully predict a kayak's maneuverability. A second design element is rocker, i.e., its lengthwise curvature. A heavily rockered boat curves more, shortening its effective waterline. For example, an 18-foot kayak with no rocker is in the water from end to end. In contrast, the bow and stern of a rockered boat are out of the water, shortening its lengthwise waterline to only 16 feet. Rocker is generally most evident at the ends, and in moderation improves handling. Similarly, although a rockered whitewater boat may only be a few feet shorter than a typical recreational kayak, its waterline is far shorter and its maneuverability far greater. When surfing, a heavily rockered boat is less likely to lock into the wave as the bow and stern are still above water. A boat with less rocker cuts into the wave and makes it harder to turn while surfing. Paddling ease and ergonomics. Some recreational kayak makers try to maximize hull volume for a given length, as shorter kayaks are easier to transport and store. Many paddlers who use a sit-in kayak feel more secure in a kayak with a weight capacity substantially more than their own weight. Maximum volume in a sit-in kayak is helped by a wide hull with high sides, but paddling ease is helped by lower sides where the paddler sits and a narrower width. A narrower kayak makes a somewhat shorter paddle appropriate, and a shorter paddle puts less strain on the shoulder joints. Some paddlers are comfortable with a sit-in kayak so narrow that the legs extend fairly straight out. Others want sufficient width to permit crossing the legs inside the kayak. Traditional style and most modern types of kayaks require that paddler be seated with the legs stretched in front of them in a right angle, in a position called the L kayaking position. Most modern kayaks feature a system comprising footrests and a backrest, designed to provide the paddler with means to support the paddling effort by allowing them to push the footrests with the feet, and the backrest with their lower back. Such arrangements were not included in kayaks made by native peoples of the Arctic regions, who were fit enough to paddle the kayaks without needing such devices. Twin-hull kayaks offer a different sitting position, called the riding position, in which the paddler's legs are not stretched out in front of them. Materials and construction. Today almost all kayaks are commercial products intended for sale rather than for the builder's personal use. Fiberglass hulls are stiffer than polyethylene hulls, but they are more prone to damage from impact, including cracking. Most modern kayaks have steep V-sections at the bow and stern, and a shallow V midships. Fiberglass kayaks need to be laid up in a mold by hand, so are usually more expensive than polyethylene kayaks, which are rotationally molded in a machine. Plastic kayaks are rotationally molded from various grades and types of polyethylene resins ranging from soft to hard. Such kayaks are particularly resistant to impact. Wooden hulls don't necessarily require significant skill and handiwork, depending on how they are made. Kayaks made from thin strips of wood sheathed in fiberglass have proven successful, especially as the price of epoxy resin has decreased in recent years. A plywood stitch and glue doesn't need fiberglass sheathing, though some builders do. Three main types are popular, especially for the home builder: stitch and amp glue, strip-built, and hybrids which have a stitch and amp glue hull and a strip-built deck. Stitch and amp glue designs typically use modern, marine-grade plywood, 1/8 inch 3 mm or up to 1/4 inch 5 mm thick. After cutting out the required pieces of hull and deck, a series of small holes are drilled along the edges. Copper wire is then used to stitch the pieces together through the holes. After the pieces are temporarily stitched together, they are glued with epoxy and the seams reinforced with fiberglass. When the epoxy dries, the copper stitches are removed. Sometimes the entire boat is then covered in fiberglass for additional strength and waterproofing, though this adds greatly to the weight and is unnecessary. Construction is fairly straightforward, but because plywood does not bend to form compound curves, design choices are limited. This is a good choice for the first-time kayak builder, as the labor and skills required is considerably less than for strip-built boats, which can take 3 times as long to build. Strip-built designs are similar in shape to rigid fiberglass kayaks, but are generally both lighter and tougher. Like the fiberglass counterparts, the shape and size of the boat determines performance and optimal uses. The hull and deck are built with thin strips of lightweight wood, often cedar, pine or redwood. The strips are edge-glued together around a form, stapled or clamped in place, and allowed to dry. Structural strength comes from a layer of fiberglass cloth and epoxy resin, layered inside and outside the hull. Strip-built kayaks are sold commercially by a few companies, priced $4,000 an hour. An experienced woodworker can build one for about $400 in 200 hours, though the exact cost and time depend on the builder's skill, the materials and the size and design. As a second kayak project, or for the serious builder with some woodworking expertise, a strip-built boat can be an impressive piece of work. Kits with pre-cut and milled wood strips are commercially available. Skin-on-frame boats are more traditional in design, materials, and construction. They were traditionally made of driftwood, pegged or lashed together, and stretched sealskin, as those were the most readily available materials in the Arctic regions. Today, sealskin is usually replaced with canvas or nylon cloth covered with paint, polyurethane, or a high-pallet rubber coating and a wooden or aluminum frame. Modern skin-on-frame kayaks often possess greater impact resistance than the fiberglass counterparts, but are less durable against abrasion or sharp objects. They are often the lightest kayaks. A special type of skin-on-frame kayak is the folding kayak. It has a collapsible frame of wood, aluminum or plastic, or a combination thereof, and a skin of water-resistant and durable fabric. Many types have air sponsons built into the hull, making the kayak float even if flooded. Modern design. Modern kayaks differ greatly from native kayaks in every aspect, from initial form through conception, design, manufacturing and usage. Modern kayaks are designed with CAD software, often in combination with CAD customized for naval design. Modern kayaks serve diverse purposes, ranging from slow and easy touring on placid water, to racing and complex maneuvering in fast-moving whitewater, to fishing and long-distance ocean excursions. Modern forms, materials and construction techniques make it possible to effectively serve these needs while continuing to leverage the insights of the original Arctic inventors. Kayaks are long, 19 feet, short, 6 feet, wide, 42 inches, or as narrow as the paddler's hips. They may attach one or two stabilizing hulls, have twin hulls like catamarans, inflate or fold. They move via paddles, pedals that turn, propellers or underwater flippers, undersail, or motor. They're made of wood, canvas, wood, carbon fiber, fiberglass, Kevlar, polyethylene, polyester, rubberized fabric, neoprene, nitrile, polyvinyl chloride, polyurethane, and aluminum. They may sport rudders, fins, bulkheads, seats, eyelets, foot braces and cargo hatches. They accommodate 1 to 3 or more paddlers, riders.